Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jevly, and this is a special Protecting the Planet with Your Kids episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, on this beautiful planet we call home. We are really happy and excited that you are joining us today. Our guest is ecologist and the illustrator of How the Birds Became Friends, Zev Labinger. Before we invite Zeb into the studio, we want to invite you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Be sure to sign up for our free newsletter. Find out what is coming up on the show and what you might have missed. We also want to invite you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Jedley Magic on Twitter, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram. And of course, we would love it if you could subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcasts. Join us right now from Tivon in Israel. We're really excited to welcome to the show. Our guest is an illustrator, an ecologist, an ornithologist. Please welcome to the show the illustrator of How the Birds Became Friends, Zev Labinger. Zeb, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
I'm really happy to have you on this special episode of the Protecting the Planet with Your Kids. Talk a little bit about your fascination with birds.
Wow. It's just one of those things that started very early. I had a fifth grade teacher who did a kind of a study group on birds. And out of that class, three of us went on to become professional ornithologists, which is kind of amazing when I think about it.
Yeah.
So it started there, and it immediately, I was, 10, 11, and I immediately just became fascinated by it. And it actually started through drawing. I was drawing a lot already in class, and I started to do identification cards with drawing the birds, and I joined Audubon, and it's just continued since then. Hasn't let up.
Now you as I said, you're the illustrator of How the Bird Became Friends, which was written by Noah Baum, and it's a beautiful picture book that talks about how birds, put down their animosity towards each other and became friends and found peace. But I as I understand it, the illustrations that you created had to be authentic and accurate. It's not like cartoony illustrations.
Well, it's funny because I come from the kind of painting. I do painting and illustrations, and I've done quite a few guidebooks and things like that. So I'm very much into making it very exact and realistic. But from the beginning, Noah also had a vision that it would be a kind of a more artsy book, that it wouldn't be too simplified, but still that the birds would have personalities, and they wouldn't be, just like you would see in a bird book. So actually for me, it was a great challenge. As a kid, I loved comics anyway, but I went back and I started looking at, okay, so how do you make expressions, and what are the main things? And so the birds, on the one hand, for anybody who's into birds, they're all identifiable to exactly which species. That was really important for me. And I took birds from all over the world. But on the other hand, I gave them very human-like expressions. So their eyes and the way their bills are and things are very personable, and they show emotion.
Yeah.
So it was it was a new thing for me, too.
Yeah. I bet that was a real challenge for you.
It was a real challenge. I have a whole sketchbook that I was just playing around with, how do I make crow look mad? And sometimes I would send it, to the familiars people and to Noah, and I said, no, he looks actually, sad. He doesn't look mad. And went back and forth with that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. You were sharing with me before we started recording that bird watching is like huge all around the world. It's like the number one outdoor activity all around the world. Why do you think humans have this fascination with birds?
Yeah, it's amazing. I also ask myself, what is it that drew me into birds and has been a lifelong passion? And it's not an unusual story. A lot of people into birds, there's two types. There's those that got into it later in life, but the ones that got into it early, they usually got into it very early, at 10, 11. I don't know, I mean, the biggest thing I think is that they fly, and we as humans, marvel at that, and we would all, I think, love to fly, especially as kids, fly away and have that freedom. But I think the other thing is, and I think what makes it so fantastic, is they're very accessible. Anywhere in the world, anywhere you go, you see birds. It's much harder to see insects. Mammals are mostly coming out at night. There's fewer of them. And they're just everywhere, and they're flashy, and they tend to be very colorful, and they're unexpected because of migrations and movements. And so it's just this whole world, and wherever you go, there's birds around. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's, and somehow, it touches human culture in a very deep way. Yeah. You see it around the world.
I've shared on the podcast, and I shared with Zev before we started that my home is right next to a bird sanctuary, and we're on a migration trail two or three times in the spring and 2 or 3 times in the fall. Our backyard becomes a rest stop, and literally you go out there, and there are thousands of birds just kind of chilling, and it's for an hour or so, and it's just incredible and they're very loud, and they're busy. They're flying from here to there, and they need to stop and rest and chat, I guess. And it's just the first time it happened, I really kind of freaked out. I didn't, and I'm like, is this the Alfred Hitchcock's bird? So I have to be worried about this. So, it really is wonderful. We've talked a lot here on the podcast about pollution in the ocean and how plastic in the ocean are affecting the sea mammals and the fish and the coral reefs. What about birds? Are the actions that human beings are taking, is global warming, climate change, is that having an adverse effect on birds?
It's definitely having an adverse effect overall. I mean, with everything, there are those species that actually benefit from these changes. So there's some species that proliferate and they become much more common and sometimes to the detriment to other species. But by and large, it's very detrimental. And actually birds, as I was saying, one of the great things about them is they're found everywhere, and they're fairly easy to study because you see them. So a lot of the basic research on climate change and on pollution and on is actually done on birds, because they're so, they fill all the niches in the ecology and the surroundings, and they're easy to monitor, fairly easy. And so, even the earliest work on climate change, which is already 30, 40 years ago, is showing how birds nesting in the north are slowly nesting at later dates. And because they're less nesting in later dates, sometimes the insects that they were used to, that were abundant when they were feeding their young, are no longer the same abundance. And so it's very complicated and very, each species and each group, it's a very different story. But it's very, very prevalent and worrisome. Right. And on top of that, of course, the loss of habitats and you were talking about the birds in your area, migration. Many birds, not all of them, migrate great distances, And those migration paths and those stopover areas, which are critical, are also becoming less and less. And climate change, the weather situation is changing, so they get caught in storms that they never got caught in and things like that. So there's a lot of difficulty. It's amazing that they're able to survive the way they do. But
I'm just fascinated because there's so much, where they are around us and they're part of our lives and they always have been part of our lives, but they're so different, not only in that they're able to fly, but, there's the expression bird brain, and you think, well, the bird's head is so small, their brain must be really tiny, but those tiny brains make nests. We had a robin nest in our front yard about a year ago. And when the eggs finally hatched and they moved away from the nest, we took a picture of that nest, and it was identical to pictures of robin nests on the internet. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's no robin IKEA that they went to buy that nest. That was, and they didn't have a blueprint or, and then when you get into this, migration, they're able to go from Canada down to Mexico, South America. Do we have any idea how that happens?
It's also very complicated, and it really depends on different species. But and like that nest you were talking about, part of it is genetic and built in, and part of it is learned. And for each species, it's a little bit different how much for each side of that. But yeah, no, it's incredible. Yeah,
it really is. And, you were mentioning earlier that, one of the things that probably fascinates human beings about birds is that they're able to fly. And living here next to a bird sanctuary for 20 years and spending time just watching the birds, they don't all fly in the same way. There's like a lot of variety in the way that birds fly. Is there any kind of science behind that?
Huge science behind it, of course. There's the basic thing is active flyers and passive flyers. Birds that soar. So birds that soar usually are birds that are also migrating during the day, and they go up in these kettles and these thermals. And so they're able to fly great distances without using a lot of energy. So it'd be all of your big birds of prey and cranes and even herons and all sorts of things like that. Usually they're slow flyers, and usually they're bigger birds. And then you have, ducks and things like that are very rapid flyers. And all of that affects their ecology and how much they need to eat and where they need to nest, what kind of habitats they're in, etc.
Yeah. That would be a fun thing, I think, for a family to do, just to go out and start making those observations and start talking with our kids about that. Oh, yeah, we're seeing the birds and they're cool, but what are we noticing about the birds? What kind of, what can we build on as we're talking to kids and helping them start to make those observations? Where can we go after that?
Well, first of all, I think I see it all the time, and I always tell parents when I see little kids are always looking at nature around them. What happens, though, I think, is the parents have no idea. A bird flies by and the kid, raises his eyes, follows the bird, but the parent is just going off, and so if we're watching our kids also a little bit more, but if we can encourage that, oh, you saw a bird, wow, wonder what bird it is. I think it's just those kinds of things to really start to notice all of the nature around us, because it's just everywhere, insect lands here, this plant's starting to flower. There's the cycads are coming out now in the States, a 17-year cycle. It's amazing. And I was just reading the citizen science, which is now a really growing thing, that everybody now can report online through their telephone all sorts of phenomenon. there's 150,000 people right now in just the last week that have reported where the cycads are coming out. And I just thought that's fantastic. There's, of course, for birds, it's eBird out of Cornell University, which is now worldwide. And they have literally hundreds and hundreds of millions of reports of where birds are every day. And those things are also helping science figure out what's going on. But getting back to kids, it's just first, I think the connection's there. I think it's just encouraging that natural connection at the young age and not, oh, it's just a bird. Let's, go here. And it was also just coming back to the book. It was definitely a big impetus for me about this book is that I thought this is a great way to get kids to connect to nature and especially birds. I know with me as a kid, at first it's hard to see birds outside, but you start looking at books and pictures and getting online and stuff, and you start to see things up close. And I think those kinds of things also can really turn the kids on. Yeah. But, I think all those areas, and I think it's something we all naturally have, but we're cut off from it at a certain age. And I think it's a matter of connecting because of, eventually I think it's the things, I forget who said it, but it's the things that we love that we're going to want to save. But we first have to love them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is true. It's things we care about, the things that we love are the things that we preserve and we fight for. And we're at a moment in history right now where we need to fight for our planet. And what a great way to start that fight in a real positive, loving way, but to just help our kids become more aware of the nature around us. And nature is everywhere. I mentioned living next to a bird sanctuary. I live in the city of Boston. It's far from downtown Boston, but even in downtown Boston, in the different neighborhoods, there's nature that we can become more aware of and help our kids and help ourselves develop that love for the planet that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's all around us. You can find it in every big city. There's things happening. There's birds flying through. There's all sorts of critters running around at night that nobody knows about. We saw it now during the corona where everything was quiet. All of a sudden, all this wildlife was showing up, walking around downtown cities. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Other than just helping our kids become more aware of nature and fall in love with nature, is there a way that we can because kids love to draw, they love to create art. Is there something that you can suggest parents to do to, kind of combine art and drawing and getting kids connected with nature?
Wow, it's a great question. For me, they were combined. Every time I was outside and I saw a bird or something or whatever it was, I always felt this need to draw it. And actually, only later I realized that actually the act of drawing, even if it's not realistic and you feel frustrated, it doesn't look like what you're doing. The act of actually drawing is really helping you bring it more clearly into your brain and to understand it more clearly. And I just think it's a great way to connect and to really kind of understand what you're seeing in a way. I remember also, sitting and just having to draw a wing and realizing, okay, I don't actually know which feathers are white and which feathers are black. And you start to really get into details, I think, when you actually have to sit down and draw it. So it's a great way to connect, although, as much as I love it, I'm not sure it's for every child's going to connect that way. Mm-hmm. I mean, others might do it in a different way. But I, definitely do think so. And you can also look through history, all the great scientists, natural scientists anyway, they all kept journals where they were doing drawings of everything. And even in the age now where everything can be photographed, it's not the same as a drawing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All the field guides today, I was going to just say that the field guides today still use paintings, even though there's so many photographs out there. Yeah. There's something about a painting that, an illustration that can show things that a photograph can't.
Wow. So grabbing a pen and paper, some crayons, some markers, getting out in the backyard, taking a drive to a field, looking at the birds, noticing how they're flying, but also sitting down and just taking the effort to think that hand-brain-eye connection, it just makes it more real for kids.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think it really just brings it home in a way. It really makes it real.
So how the birds became friends, it features all these different birds. Noah, who is going to be on the show later in the season, starts the interview with this beautiful dramatic reading of the beginning of the book. And I'm just she just draws pictures with her words. Was there a favorite bird of all the birds that you drew for that story? Was there a favorite?
Wow, that's a hard one, No, I think as far as the drawings go, they were all kind of fun. I started getting, started searching for all sorts of interesting birds. I drew like a cassowary, which was something, in Australia and very different. So there were things that for me, it was the first time I painted them. No, I enjoyed, actually what I really enjoyed was trying to fit a lot of different birds. I have one page that I made kind of like a comics page, and there's a lot of birds in there, and there's all these little call outs, saying, I'm a better bird than you, and wow, and bang, and all those kind of things. So I had a lot of fun just trying to fit all that in and create that kind of cacophony of a lot of birds.
Yeah. What a perfect word when we're talking about birds. And it's certainly, talking about when the birds kind of chill out on their migration here, it's that cacophony. That's just the perfect word for it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, we're really excited. I know that How the Birds Became Friends, it would be a great addition to any family library, and also just helping our kids become more aware of birds, because again, we hear so much about the ocean, and lots of us live along the coastline, and we can see the ocean, but we can't go under it, and we really haven't explored that much of it. Connecting our kids with birds and helping our kids gain a better appreciation and love for birds may be the thing that just ignites that passion that we need kids to have for our planet.
Definitely. And I would say, I would link it also to the other part of the book, which is about peace and making friendship and respect between each other. And I think, there's this whole area called environmental justice. And I think that we really can't save the planet if we're also not treating each other right. So I think those things go hand in hand, peace with ourselves and peace with the planet, peace with the other animals around us.
Well, that is a great place to end this conversation. This has been, I've really been eye-opening. Zeb, can you tell everybody, now we know that the book is going to be available in September. It's available for pre-order right now from our friends at Familius. And so we're going to encourage everybody to check out the Familius website and also pre-order on Amazon or maybe with your local independent bookstore. Is there a place online where folks can go to learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I have an Instagram site, which is my full name, Zev Labinger, and Facebook, and I have a website that is on the Wix, but you can also find it very easy by my name. So we'd be happy for people to look into that too.
We've had a wonderful time speaking with illustrator, ecologist, onthologist, the illustrator of How the Birds Became Friends, Zev Labinger. Zeb, thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it also.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Sarah McGough. She'll be here to celebrate Eddie Finds a Family, her debut picture book. It's a beautiful book about adoption. You don't want to miss it. Sarah McGough, the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guest, Zev Labinger. Be sure to check out How the Birds Became Friends. Also want to thank my team, Alana Doherty, Fatima Khan, Helen Frazier, Justina Thompson. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. We all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids and by protecting the planet with your kids. I'll be looking through the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.